We're starting our open prep cycle in TTT Compete Monday, January 2nd. During this cycle, we're going to make sure that all athletes are prepared for the time of the season that matters most to them. Navigating your training while also competing in the open can be a major challenge for athletes. We're going to make sure that whether you're doing the workout once or your plan is for repeats, that you know exactly what to do, what movements to do in training, and when to do your actual open attempts. And finally, in this training cycle, we're going to put extra focus on the skills that make the biggest difference on the leaderboard. That means when these workouts come out in the open, you've done more volume and you have more confidence to crush those skills. To see 6 of the featured workouts from this training cycle with demos from our on-site athletes and get a limited time offer for joining today, visit trainingthinktank.com/compete. Also, on our website, you'll find more information on training programs if you're not into competing, if you're an affiliate owner, or getting help with your nutrition.
The best part about my day is this coffee.
And everyone got it except for me, Adam.
I didn't get the coffee. The coffee was brought to me, so I don't put it on me.
I
Don't put that evil on me.
Yeah, can we turn the camera around? Chris has coffee. Adam has coffee. Mia does not
Spoiler
have
alert,
coffee.
when you see me on the screen, that's from me like a year ago. The shit that's on the desk isn't even on the desk right now.
No, it's not. So we actually had a really cool, like, creative setup over there by the desk, which is what the people will see. Talk again, and then put it on
see
yourself.
my Green Ranger, RIP.
Is something pointing at you right now?
No, that's what
I
he's
just
saying.
used the clip from a year ago every time I
It's the
talk.
same clip.
The Wilson from Home Improvement.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so we all walk in here one day, and everyone, it was funny because I actually was sitting at this table right here, and as every person walked in, they were like, where did everything go?
Oh, yeah, I took everything home for those who can't see because I'm not going to film this.
It looks so bad. It's just a bare wall now.
It's brutal.
A stand-up desk that nobody uses.
Yeah, exactly. Who built that, John?
Mm-hmm.
Good for him.
Yeah.
All right, Adam, we're talking about open prep. We are, what's the actual day? Less than 100 days for sure from the open.
Less than 100 days.
Yeah.
Man, it might be like 10 weeks now.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
So the week that we're filming this, we're coming up on our Winter is Coming competition, which is kind of our awesome, it's kind of the climax of our quote unquote, what we call our winter cycle. And then we'll have a little bit of a deload. And then when we come back, both our individual clients and our online programming clients in Compete will start their open prep, which for most people, it may be quarterfinals prep because many of the athletes that we coach know that they're going to make it through the open and then get into quarterfinals. But I think this conversation kind of is the holistic approach of how to crush the open, how to crush quarterfinals, and have a better placing than next year.
Yeah, I think
Than last year?
Last year's.
well,
place better than you do next year.
you don't have a placement yet, so you'll probably beat it.
Sorry.
I think it's important for people to take a step back, maybe right now if they haven't already done it, and figure out where the crux of their season is. So that way you know. Like if the open really is like the ultimate point of your season, make sure that you're ready for the start of it when it comes to the end of February. If you know that you're probably going to get through the open and quarterfinals is going to be the important point of your season, know that ahead of time because it can change things. You have an extra 3 to 4 weeks to be able to prep if quarterfinals is really where you're going to try and peak for. So making sure that they're taking a step back. No, are you an open athlete? Are you a quarterfinal athlete? We're not really sure if anybody can really say, am I a semifinal level athlete or not? Because it's going to be different. It's going to be different. Yeah. So I think it's important for people to bring that awareness and know ahead of time, where is my season actually going to come to the most important point of it and be ready for that.
Yeah. I think the cool thing in our online program Compete is we have a path that's dedicated to those that aren't sure if they can get in the top 10%. So let's say I come on board and I'm like, man, last year I didn't make quarterfinals. I think I'm good enough, but I probably need to test and retest each of the open workouts. The intermediate path would be that for you. And then obviously if you have a coach, they'll help you test and retest. For everyone else, it's more, let's think about how to prepare for quarterfinals because the workout selection is slightly different. You have to kind of cram all those workouts into one weekend. And so obviously we'll prep them for that.
Yeah, I think it's important that if you picture yourself as being on the bubble, whether it be like open to quarters or quarters to semis, that you need to make sure that you're putting enough energy into the kinds of tests and the way that the tests are administered at that level right there. Now, for people who have a good idea, like maybe it's like 70-30, I'm probably going to make it through, you still need to make sure that you're doing a lot of things right at this point in the season so that you can afford to not have to do too many redos, to not have to put too much energy into it so that you can be ready for what comes afterwards. And the other side of that, which is probably what's going on in the RX path, is touching the kinds of things that are going to be unique to quarterfinals. So
for sure.
There's different kinds of equipment. There's different kinds of tests. There's obviously a much higher density of tests that go into it. You need to be touching that, even if you're not 1,000% sure that you're going to get there. If it's anywhere like 50-50, be ready for it. Be working on those kinds of things and the style of tests and the different kinds of movements that are going to come there, but don't get too ahead of yourself when it comes to the training.
Yeah. Before we talk about the training and kind of movement selection, identifying the weaknesses that you may have, let's go back and identify or talk about how to identify if you need to focus on the open or if you can focus on quarterfinals. What are the things that you would tell an athlete to look at first, like right now in their training or maybe previous tests, to get a feel for, should I be focusing only on crushing the open so I can get into quarterfinals, or do I need to just focus on quarterfinals?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is probably looking back at past year's data. Like, where were you finishing? What's the trend look like in terms of your progress year to year? I think a lot of times people who follow a very well put together program, they can expect to have some percent improvement year after year, whether it be like 3%, 5%. There's going to be differences because the sport is never predictable. We don't know what the tests are going to be, but there are trends that still exist over time. You've taught me that as much as anybody. If you're getting better at the things that you need to get better at, you're probably going to get better with respect to your peer group as well. So if you have historical data that you can go look at and say like, all right, last year I was top 12%. The year before that I was top 15%. It's trending up. And so this year I'm really going to go everything I can to get that top 10%. So you know that you have a chance there. If you were top 50%, top 60%, maybe that's a little bit more clear and you kind of know this is what I'm going to do and this is what I'm going to focus on. If you don't have historical data, then it really is go and do those tests. Go and do those tests and figure out how do you actually line up. There's more than enough time right now. And it's something that we'll talk about later when we actually talk about what should your training look like. You want to know what your weaknesses are. You want to know how you stack up against your peer group. So I would very much encourage, if you haven't done past year's open, go and pick 4 different tests over the course of 4 different years to get a feel for how do I stack up with this movement combination or this time domain, and then really just figure out and be honest with yourself. Am I an open level athlete? Am I a quarterfinal level athlete? What can I afford to do with my training at this point in the season to set myself up for success?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of retesting workouts or testing them for the first time, to your point, if you're someone that's new to the sport, but do it in the exact same standards and ways that they have tested them in the past. Have a judge, have your camera set up, like get the whole environment so you feel that pressure, and then obviously review your video, get a feel for the strengths and weaknesses that you may have, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then you can identify from those 4 or 5 workouts what things you need to work on, but then more importantly, am I crushing these? Am I in the top 10%? Or, hey, I'm not even close. I need to focus on the open this year.
You can get like a global view of how you compare if you look at the battery of tests that you chose and try and get a balance for them, again, if you don't have any historical data. But you can also get a really good idea of any specific weaknesses that you can afford to isolate and work on. I mean, the good thing now is like, it's not right around the corner. It's looming, and that's why we're going to talk about it, because we do think that there's enough time to be able to address things, to be able to put some habits into place that you're going to be able to benefit from when things do start, when the season actually kicks off. So
let's jump into the kind of movement selection, identifying the weaknesses, or maybe even it's a strength, like something that you're really good at and you know that you can utilize that in the open. How would you suggest an athlete look at their current data, the pool of workouts that they have, and then also identify things maybe that they haven't done yet?
Well, what's one of the interesting things is when you go and you look at past scores, there's a lot of context that can be missed in terms of how things are comparing or what the actual limitation was inside of a workout, right? So I like to look at data. I like to know, like, where did you compare? Were you top 1,000 people in this one? Were you top 10,000 people in this one? I need those numbers. But you have to talk to that person, or if you don't have a coach, you need to be able to go and look, what slowed you down? What slowed you down in the combination of wall walks and dumbbell overhead and box jump overs? Was it your legs? Was it your breathing? Was it your skill on the wall walks? What was it that actually slowed you down? Because a lot goes into the score, the number of it. So one of the biggest things that you try and look at when you're thinking about movements or you're thinking about limitations is you're actually trying to identify what was the rate limiting step in that workout. I can't just say, man, 22.1, that was it. I just got to keep doing variations of that workout, because it might not be it. You might be really good at wall walks. You might be really, really good at box jump overs, but your hinging mechanics are crap. Your overhead position is really bad when it comes to the dumbbell. You can afford to just isolate that one thing and work on it without having to spend the wasted time of doing everything else because you had blinders on for the overall score.
I'm a perfect example of this, because in that workout, I still had a really good score, but the box jumps were such a limiter for me. If it was just wall walks and dumbbell snatch, not to like sound egotistical, but I could have I could have one of the top scores for someone that doesn't train consistently, right? But you put the box jumps in there, and it's all of a sudden it's just a very average score, because I can't bound the box jumps as fast as most athletes that are good at the sport. So if I looked at that workout, I'm like, man, I finished, let's just whatever it was, top 3%, but I want to be top 1%. I just need to cram that workout down. But in reality, it's like, no, my dumbbell snatches are good, my wall walks are really good, but my box jumps are really bad. So you're saying, look at the workout, review it, and then you can even go, one of the things that I would suggest is pull your workout up side by side with your peer group. So it may not be a games athlete because that's probably not fair, but let's just say if you're a top 5% athlete, find other people that posted their workout that were in that top 5%, and then you can identify like, wow, their box jumps were 5 seconds per round faster than me, but I was faster than the dumbbell snatches or the wall walks. And then you can kind of really kind of zone in on the things that you need to work on.
And you can also improve the skill of it by watching somebody else. How did they actually do the box jump overs? What was their technique on the wall walks? How were they breathing when they did the dumbbell snatches? Like there's ways that you can do it that you can actually get the data that you're talking about, but just watching somebody that's really good do it, you can learn so much from that. Even if it's just like maybe not the best in the world, but if I've got somebody else at my gym who beat my score by a minute, what did they do that was different than me? How can I try and improve something? Because you might get something skill-wise, you might get something execution-wise, even just something small technique that's going to make a difference over the course of a 15-minute workout.
Yeah, you know, in every other sport, they are always reviewing film. They're looking at it like, what am I doing with my hands or my feet? Or like, you know, I played football, so what are you doing with your route? Or how are you blocking this guy? You know, where are your hands going on his pads? But in CrossFit, we're always just thinking about like, how can I go harder? In reality, though, a lot of times it could just be a movement economy thing. Like, wow, look at their footwork on the box step overs. Maybe I should try that, and it could be more efficient for me.
It's she's not an open level athlete. She's a games level athlete. But Alexis last year, she had hurt her back before that first workout. What that meant is we delayed the start of her actual attempt all the way to Monday. What that meant was we saw all of these people do the workout, and we knew that she could put up a top score in the world. We watched how they did their box jump overs, how they did their wall walks, what the transition was in between the stations. It was almost like this circular pattern, and she put up a top 5 score in the world. There's so much that you can gain. Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Watch the whole thing.
It's just really cool because small little refinement things, like even like she wasn't at 1,000% physically, but because we had the advantage of watching other people do it, it's like being in the last heat when you're at a competition. You can watch everybody else do it. You get an idea for pacing, but you also get an idea for execution and everything else. It makes such a big difference.
There's such a benefit to that. So like, even if you're not a great athlete or you're not trying to make top 10%, if you want to get better at the sport, it's worth watching both the best and then in your peer group so you can get an idea of how you can improve your own game. So kind of diving deeper into looking at a workout, figuring out what the actual limitation is. One of the things that most people don't think about is how one movement may impact another one. So for example, going back to that box jump theory for me, box jumps, for some reason, whatever, bounding mechanics or just like because I have to be very careful with my left knee and having some issues there, really jack up my heart rate to the point where then I have to slow down on other things. When if I just did that workout with wall walks and dumbbell snatches, I could have my heart rate at the same, 185 beats per minute the entire workout and still go fast. But something with the box jumps limits my ability to do the other movements well. Would you tell an athlete to look into that? Like maybe it's handstand push-ups blow up your wall balls because of your shoulders, or double unders really fatiguing your handstand push-ups as another example. Are you telling athletes to look at something like that?
Yeah, I think where we're going with that is we're trying to figure out what is the rate limiting step inside of that workout. It might be a movement or skill limitation within one given movement, but it also might be what you're saying. It might be a combination of things. So if I've got wall walks mixed with double unders and I know that I have a hard time with double under just sustainability and endurance because my shoulders are blown up, I can't trust in my forearms because everything's filled with blood, that's something that I have to work on. I have to work on what it feels like to do a certain kind of movement under a certain kind of residual fatigue. And that's something that you can isolate and work on a little bit more, but it's also something very unique to the sport in terms of how things are sort of combined and thrown together. So the one thing that we talked about before is trying to look at the workout as a whole. How does the data compare? What is the rate limiting step? And then also, is there a rate limiting step that exists with movement combinations that needs to be addressed? Because it's different to just go and work on your box jump overs, Brannen, because that's what's going to get you better at 22.1.
Sure.
Maybe you need to work on box jump overs with a high heart rate because you don't like what it feels like, because you don't trust your knees and you don't trust your ankles. And then when your heart rate gets up, everything starts to get a little bit more anxious, and it's like, no, I just got to slow down. This doesn't feel right. So thinking a little bit more about what is limiting that movement. Is it the skill? Is it the capacity? Is it what it's mixed with? And then trying to address that as much as possible. But the good thing is we have enough time. Like there's still enough time to be able to do this analysis, identify what the weak link is, and then try and work on it as much as you can to make sure that the next time it comes up, in whatever other context that it comes up in, you're going to be more prepared than you were before.
Yeah. So you started to touch on this. Let's dive into how someone could train. They identify box jumps as a weakness, to continue to use that example, or a combination of movements that may be a weakness. How would you suggest those athletes identify that, or I should say they have already identified it? How should you what would you suggest, for them to do in their training?
I think the biggest thing when it comes to trying to prepare for a competition is making sure that they are volume resilient to the kinds of stuff that they have to do in their training. So a lot of times people just say, I have to do box jump overs every single day. I think that if you jump into the deep end of volume, you're probably going to end up doing yourself a disservice because you're probably going to get an overuse injury. So if I'm thinking about trying to improve somebody box jumps, I probably am going to try and get as ahead of that as possible when it comes to intrinsic foot strength, ankle development, calf development, make sure their knees are good for it, make sure that their hips are good for it. And then after that, I can layer the training on top of it. So the training itself, first, you prepare them for the training. You prepare them physically and mechanically for what it is that they're going to do down the line. This is volume resilience. After that becomes skill refinement. So this is going to exist outside of fatigue. I want them thinking very specifically in as much detail as possible. What does it look like to execute this skill at a level that's above what I was doing before? On a box jump over, what we saw is a lot of times people jump over the box, they step off, they jump off, and they take extra steps on this side, or they're not facing the right direction. They didn't start twisting as they were going over. So what happens is they spent too much time with their feet on the ground and not actually moving up and over the box. Whereas you saw somebody who's at the best in the world, as soon as their feet hit the ground on the far side, they're back up, right? So what it's probably going to be is this second step here when I'm working on skill refinement and actually movement speed. I want you to do 10 reps and I want you to try and hold 2.5 seconds per rep, and we're going to rest 3 to 1, right? Not fatigue based. Make sure that you are thinking about where your feet are going each and every time. How are you breathing when you're going up and over this box? Are you twisting and turning to set yourself up to have limited amount of time with your feet on the ground? Then after that, you start to put it in movement combinations. So we've got volume resilience, we've got skill refinement with a little bit of speed work. Now we can start to put it in. We have mixed fatigue stuff in here. We can increase density, we can increase volume over here, however else you want to go around with it. But this is probably going to be dependent on what we identified as a limitation. Sure. Was it mixed with something else where you don't like your heart rate? Was it like your legs are just blowing up and we have to work on actually just figuring out how to do these guys under fatigue?
How important is the skill refinement compared to just driving up the volume to, like, you know, whatever, quote unquote, feel good before the open?
Yeah, I think it's a huge temptation in the sport to just throw volume at any problem. Right. And I think that that's something where we as coaches who have been around for a while, we've seen it, and we've seen it cause so many problems. If you just handstand push-ups are a problem, box jump overs are a problem, I'm going to do them every single day. What happens is you lose the intent. You don't hit it with as maximal intent and as mindfully as possible, and you don't get better at it. Like, what ends up happening is the volume is accomplished or executed with this sort of like sloppy mindset, and you end up just reinforcing bad patterns. Yeah. Like, if I have a bad pattern on a box jump over and I do 500 a day, guess what? I got really, really good at that bad pattern. I didn't make the skill better.
Right.
If you're trying to change something, you need to sort of like unwind it, make what was very unconscious before, make yourself conscious of it, and then re-pattern whatever it is that you were doing in there. Spend a lot of time doing very mindful practice about what it is that you're trying to do differently. And then eventually that new pattern is going to become unconscious. And then that's when you can start to go into the next steps.
Yeah. So I know many athletes are going to ask, well, what about the CrossFit? Like, I want to do 15-minute AMRAPs and 5 rounds for time and a long chipper. And let's just say that this athlete has been following a well thought out program. Maybe they haven't been hammering a ton of CrossFit throughout the year. They got much stronger. They worked on all those skills. Adam, when should I start incorporating true CrossFit, and how often into my training routine as I prep for the Open?
Yeah, I think that you still need to be doing CrossFit 2 to 3 times a week, honestly. I don't know if even at this point in the season, I'm putting things in there that still have to be improved from a skill focus, because again, what's going to end up happening is I'm going to go back to my default patterns and I'm going to do things the same way that I've always done them. I still want you breathing. I still want you challenging yourself. I still want you getting used to what that shitty feeling is of doing an open workout. And there's somebody over there who's ahead of me, and my judge is giving me no reps and my heart rate is through the roof. I have to figure out how to handle that chaos. So you can't not do CrossFit, even though we're telling you to go back and like try and unwind some things and do some skill refinement. Do that, but make sure that you are still touching the stuff that is going to make you be able to tolerate pain, be able to handle the chaos, be able to just thrive in that environment a little bit more.
Yeah, finding the balance between continuing to refine your skills, movement economy, and dealing with the pain, the chaos of the sport. Because you have to practice the chaos.
It's a pain sport. It's a pain sport. The problem is, like, you can go the other way and you can swing too far, and you can maybe try and be a little bit too methodical with your approach and your execution. And maybe you didn't do yourself a favor, because now you forgot what it feels like to be smacked in the face in the first 2 minutes of a 10-minute workout, because everything you've done has been 90-second intervals. Like, you just can't do that in this sport. There's got to be a balance with it.
Let's talk about that, because I think this also plays a huge role as mindset. Like, not only preparing yourself for the actual open workout or the quarterfinals, but preparing your mind for training that's going to feel like the open and quarterfinal workouts. So what would you recommend for someone as they kind of start preparing for open training where it is more intense, you are a little bit more focused likely than the rest of the year?
Yeah. A couple of things come to mind. I think the first is, again, like just making sure that you are touching intense, painful pieces. I would say at least 2 to 3 times a week. Make sure that you understand what it feels like to be in this place of just like this darkness. There's no escape. It's something that's high turnover. There's really no place to hide. There's no skill bottlenecks. There's no weight bottlenecks. You just have to keep moving. You have to convince yourself that you can do that. And then every single time that you win that battle in your head, you gain confidence from it. Because the problem is, like, if you wait too long to do that and then you don't have the time to build the confidence up, then when you get smacked in the face, you just kind of back off. It's like, holy shit, I don't know what to do right now.
It hurts.
It doesn't feel like this. It didn't feel like this in training.
Right.
You got to expose yourself to that. So on site, like, we do testers now that are just high turnover. Maybe it's a throwdown. Maybe it's a training on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You smack them in the face and then, hey, you guys have to figure out how to stay moving right now because that's just the sport.
Yeah. One of the benefits is being able to compare yourself when you're on site.
Yeah.
But one of the dangers is also comparing yourself to others that may be on a leaderboard if you're in our compete programs, or again, for those that are on site, there's 30 people that are posting these scores, and that still comes back to mindset. So how do you tell the athlete to handle the losses and the wins? Like maybe you crush someone that you didn't think you're going to beat, but then the next day they crush you in something that you thought you were going to win in.
I think there's so many benefits from having a good training environment, a good physical in-person training environment, from having people who are a little bit better than you, who are a little bit worse than you, and you've got this good balance of there's going to be some wins and there's going to be some losses. But there's also a lot of compromises and potential downside that goes into that. I think a way to get out ahead of this, and I think that you can even do this if you don't have a good on-site training environment, is you try and anchor your effort ahead of time to what it is that you think personally you're capable of.
Yeah.
That way, if you go out and you have an awesome performance, you executed flawlessly and you put up a great time and you still got beat by 2 minutes because somebody else is just better at this, you can't let that define what you did in that day. So what I try and do with people is you try and, again, this is something that you should probably start doing ahead of time before you get into the open-based comparisons where you're on a global leaderboard and everybody feels like crap. Look at a workout before you go and do it. Think about it in as much detail as possible. Say that it's AMRAP 15 minutes of 19 wall balls and 19 row cows, okay? I've been doing rowing progressions. I've been doing squat endurance progressions. I know about what my paces are going to be, okay? I'm going to do 11 and 8 on the wall balls. I'm going to try and hold no lower than 1050 cal per hour on the rower, okay? My transitions are going to be no more than 3 seconds in between. I'm going to try and get moving as quick as I can, and then I'm going to try and kick in the last 2.5 minutes. Talking about it like that versus just like, all right, I'm going to go give this my best shot and then see what happens. You can sort of see the difference, right? One is anchored in as much individual detail as possible based off of a lot of historical things that go into that person. The other is just completely wide open for interpretation. And this wide open for interpretation usually is going to set you up for failure because you're going to compare it to a lot of things that you probably shouldn't be comparing against. Anchor it very personally with where you're at right now. And that's going to give you a much better metric about, was today a good day? Or what could I do differently to make sure that I'm getting as close as possible to my actual capacity, right? Maybe I didn't execute on the rower. Maybe it took me too long to get up to my pace. Maybe I broke too much on the wall balls. Maybe my transitions were too slow. Put as much detail as possible on it and make sure that it's anchored specifically to you personally, because then that's going to give you tangible things to get better at, and it's going to give you a better metric for the day about, this was a good day. Like, I executed really good. I feel good about where I'm at. I know the pieces that I can get better at, and this is what I'm going to take going forward. Because that skill of being able to look at a workout, dissect it, create a plan, and then be able to also sort of like afterwards review it, where are the areas that I can improve upon, that's a skill that's invaluable in the sport in general.
I was going to say, it makes it so you can't just go through the motions. If you're going to do what you just suggested, you no longer can just show up and
exactly. So it goes back to the filming your workouts thing too. And I know that's a pain in the butt, especially
Mia's the queen of that. I was about to say king, but
she's the king queen. Mia's behind the camera. You can't see her right now.
She's here. How many workouts do you think you've filmed? You just have like, do you
Hundreds.
buy the maximum iPhone because? Oh, you upload them on YouTube?
And then deletes. She uploads to YouTube, deletes the workouts,
Wow.
but you have them forever, so you can always review. I think everyone should be doing it. If you want to get better at the sport, then you should be doing this, especially as you get closer to
It's the film
the
review
Open.
that you talked about before.
Exactly.
If you're serious about your craft, you need to be looking about how are you actually executing it, but you also need to be practicing the skill of analyzing yourself beforehand. What am I actually capable of? Instead of just saying, hey, Brannen, what are you going to do on this workout? Oh, yeah.
Just going to go as fast as I want.
You're going to row 1,600? Yeah, I'll row 1,600 too. All right.
Right.
No.
That's all he preached was watching video.
Yeah. I always take these things to golf, but it's something that I've been doing in my golf game to help my swing is I've been filming and then reviewing and then also watching the ball flight, because the ball never lies of what's going on with the club face. And then I just, it doesn't. The eye in the sky never lies and the ball never lies. And then I write down, which I know seems super geeky, but like that's the thing that I want to get better at right now. And I have some goals there. So I'll write down like, okay, today the bias was it kept shaping too far to the left or whatever. Yeah. And so that has helped me because then I can identify from day to day, like what's the difference? Like what am I doing differently in my swing and why is it shaped this way? Yeah. The same thing in the sport of CrossFit. If you want to get better at it, again, going back to the review, you can then have these tangible goals, but then also see where you messed up, or maybe you executed perfectly, but then on those days you executed perfectly, you still take those notes and say, this is why I did this well. My transitions were super fast. I got out of the rower and to the wall ball in 3 seconds, like you said, whatever it may be, so they can identify those things and continue to improve upon them moving forward.
I think the one thing that I would recommend for people to start working on right now is start when you have a tester that day. We want you to be focused on that tester. Okay. So we talked earlier about the difference between intensity and volume.
Right.
The problem is going to be with the open looming that people are going to have maybe a tester in the day. They're going to want to do some strength stuff. They're going to want to do some skill stuff. The quality over the course of that session is going to go down because they get caught up in this idea that volume is going to solve their problem. It's not. What you need to do right now is you need to ramp up your intent inside of that session. Pick 1 or 2 of those things and just hit it with as much focus as possible. If it's a CrossFit Metcon and I'm trying to do it as mindfully and with as much intent as possible, before I even start warming up, I am looking at that thing. I'm trying to break it down into as much detail as I can to create a pace that's going to be right for me, or at least my best guess. I'm going to hit it, try and stay as close as I can. Afterwards, I'm going to review it. Where did I line up? Was my execution in line with what I planned, or was it different? Why was it different? What can I do next time to set myself up for success? What did I learn from here that's going to make me better over time? It's this process that people don't do because they're so busy trying to do so much other stuff. Do one thing in the day and do it really, really well, and you're going to get better.
Yeah. And as a side note too, you can do this throughout the year. Maybe we talk about intention and intensity. It doesn't have to be intensity in a way that you think of like you're falling on the ground afterward. It can be intensity in focused technical work of your snatch. Like I tell people all the time, like continue to record and review your snatch and have the same intensity in making it perfect. It may not be I'm falling over and I'm breathing really hard, but it's still so detail oriented and focused on making sure that you're improving on the thing you're working on that day.
Yeah. Intensity can be, I was going to cuss. I'm going to try not to cuss. It can be a mind if you allow it to be.
Right.
I can hit a workout as hard as possible, but it doesn't mean that I did it as well as I could have.
Yes.
And that's the problem, right? So say that it's wall balls and rowing and I hit the first 5 minutes like it was just a 5-minute workout, but really it's a 15-minute workout. At the end of the 15 minutes, I'm laying on the floor in a pool of blood, sweat, and puke. And I'm like, oh man, that was everything I had. I feel so good about that. It's like, that was not everything you had from
execution.
A score standpoint, right? You didn't hit it with intent. You hit it with intensity, right? But intensity is different than actually trying to optimize what you were capable of in that setup. So again, trying to mindfully think about what it is that you're capable of, create the plan, try and execute the plan, and then review afterwards.
Yeah. So for mindset, control the controllables.
Yeah.
Focus on the things that you know that you can control. Are there any other things with mindset? Do you think that it's important that when you do lose that you still need to have a strategy to come back and make sure that you continue to execute?
Yeah, I think so we talked about trying to anchor what it was that went into that performance ahead of time to make sure that the comparisons don't drive you crazy or make you a depressed person, because that's always bad. But if you are competing for a spot, you need to care about these comparisons, right? You need to know how far off you are, and you need to be very mindful about what it's going to take to close that gap. So I think comparisons, if you can keep them as tangible as possible and as impersonal as possible, that's the best bet. So again, like if I can anchor personally what I think my best effort is, that's how I'm going to try and control that as much as possible. But I need to be very aware, what's my peer group doing in the side of this setup? What are they doing objectively, numbers wise, that's different from me? And then what do I need to be doing differently to try and close that gap? I think that's how you try and make the comparisons work for you instead of against you.
Yeah, it's a great way to see where you're at and benchmark yourself, and then continue to try to achieve the goal that you have.
You have to know, you have to know where they're at, or else you're training mindlessly.
Exactly. One of the other things I think that this is the most boring topic for most people, but it's recovery. Yeah. Making sure that when you are doing 3 hard CrossFit sessions a week and a bunch of hard skill work and strength training, that you're still recovering between your sessions so you can give the intent and intensity that you want. So how important is this for the everyday athlete or the games athlete?
You can't even put a tag on how valuable this is. It's the most important thing that people give the least amount of value to. And I don't know how else to say it, honestly. Like, if you aren't recovering as hard as you're training, you are doing yourself a complete disservice, and you should probably stop training with that intensity. Yeah. Right? You have to recover. Like, say that you train 90 hours a day, or 90 minutes a day, maybe not 90 hours. You should probably be doing...
That'd be a lot of hours in a day.
You should probably be doing recovery-focused metrics or activities for at least 90 minutes, right? If you're a games level athlete and you're training for 3 to 4 hours a day, that's another 3 to 4 hours of that day that they need to be doing mobility, down regulation, breathing, massage work, body work, all this sort of PT stuff. It has to match that. And if you're not matching that, say that you have a 9 to 5, you walk into the gym, you train from 5:30 to 7, you go home, you eat dinner, and you fall asleep, your recovery did not match the intensity there, which means that you're probably training at a level that you shouldn't be training at. It's not going to be sustainable. So sleep is probably the most important. One of the things that we talk about with sleep is you need just start now. Like, don't assume that you're all right after the new year, after I get out of the holidays, right, like then I'm going to try and reset the habits that are going into this. Start now. Like, start doing the things that are going to get you that extra 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes of quality sleep. I just think that so many people undervalue it, and they just sort of like, yeah, it's fine. I'll just, I'll sleep next week, or I'll sleep next month, when it really matters. It matters now, because it's going to improve the quality of life right now. It's going to improve the quality of training right now. And then 2 months down the line, when the season starts, you're going to feel in so much better shape, because all of the quality from here to then improves.
Not to mention, you're going to have those butterflies like Santa's coming the day before the Open.
Yeah.
Question for you. You mentioned people with the 9 to 5 coming in and not being able to recover. Would you say that it's probably worth someone taking an extra rest day if they can't? Like, what's the solution then?
I think if I have any recommendation for people, it's to try and create a training program that can be as consistent as possible. Right. So I don't know what that looks like for any given person, but I do know that usually if we can make the time spent or the resources sort of invested into recovery at least match the resources that are invested into training, that's going to be a much more consistent program for that person. Right. Whether it be a 60-minute class, 60 minutes at the end of the day while I'm watching TV or hanging out with my kids, I'm doing some mobility, I'm doing some down regulation breathing, I'm making sure that I'm hydrating, and I'm getting to bed before 9:30 or 10 o'clock. It's those things. Right. And then the more intense that my training becomes, or the more volume I have to put in my training because I'm more invested in it, even more stuff has to go into recovery. So for the person who's doing a class, I would say maybe if we look at it over the course of a week instead of just over a day, if you have an extra rest day in there, instead of just going in and hitting a CrossFit class workout, that's an extra 60 minutes, you're probably filling your cup up instead of pouring more out of it, which is probably going to lead to more consistency over time.
Yeah. I do think there's a huge difference between the 9 to 5 person that's just coming in and doing a CrossFit class that wants to get better and the games athlete, in that we understand how much more challenging it is for someone that has a full-time job. They're not trying to make the games. They're just like, I want to go and have some fun. I want to learn how to do a ring muscle up. And so Adam talks about this, but there are plenty of ways that you can incorporate recovery modalities into your day-to-day life. You know, one of the things that I do is like I have my kids and we do like some mobility stuff together. Like we'll be sitting there and they'll watch Blippi and I'm doing some 90-90 work, right? And they'll do it with me. And is it perfect? No. Is it what Alexis is doing at night? No. But it's an opportunity for me to still express some recovery as opposed to me just like, going about my day and never getting any recovery work in. Yeah. And then the same thing's true with sleep. I think that this is an important topic. Most people are watching a show, they're on their iPhone, they're maybe, getting hyped up before bed by reading a scary book or whatever. Finding ways to be able to kind of down regulate during that time is really important. And you can still do that with your iPhone in hand. Maybe it's like doing some progressive muscle relaxation. I do that often throughout the night or throughout the week during the night. Or maybe it's reading a book to your kids and letting that, I breathe as I'm reading books to them. Like there's some silly ways that you can kind of calm yourself down. Just,
hey kids, red fish, blue fish.
But the good thing is, don't overcomplicate it. It doesn't, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to do anything that's crazy complicated to do. Like Kyle's movement mobility routine, right? Yeah. It doesn't have to change too much week to week. It just has to be consistent. And then your body, your mind, your mood, everything is going to improve if you can just find this consistent routine and then set the habit now so that you're not trying to do everything, throw everything in the kitchen sink at the wall come open quarterfinals time, because it's just too late at that point.
I do think finding a routine makes a lot of sense. And so I've tried to set one for myself and bring my family into that. That's a good recommendation. You just talked about the movement mobility path that we have in TTT Compete. It is an amazing opportunity for you to just,
so good.
Yeah, you just plug and play. You literally open it up, you look at the path, and it has demo videos for each of the movements, and you can follow that. It takes you 20, maybe 30 minutes at most. You can cut some out if you don't have that time, but most people have 20. I mean, what else? People are watching TV at the end of the night, right? Or doing something else that's just a waste of time. You could add that in.
Yeah, I mean, you can convince yourself that like I need a little me time at the end of the day, but honestly, like what's it doing for you? It's letting you sort of like just like push things over to the side instead of actually address them. This is helping you recover. It's helping you improve and fill your cup up for the next day so that the next day can have even more quality and even more intent, like mindful execution of everything that you did that day if you're taking the time to take care of yourself. So with the movement mobility routine, like we're just trying to remove
What's an example of something we might see in there?
So it's basically the way we set it up is it's a walkthrough routine, and there are 6 days a week, so Monday through Saturday. There, and you can obviously plug and play on a Sunday too.
So you
can
do with the training, or they're all just unique?
So they're unique to body parts or movements. So like, for example, maybe we are working on the squat one day. So there may be some ankle flexion work, maybe some hip rotation work. Maybe the next day it's shoulder flexion to get your overhead position a little bit better. And the next day, maybe it's thoracic rotation and extension. So all of the days look different, but they're targeted at specific movements for the sport. And the most important ones, at least in my opinion, would be the squat position, the overhead position. Yeah. So that's the majority of it, but you also see stuff for your wrist. You'll see stuff maybe for your knees and other positions that you'll have to get into in the sport.
Yeah, the whole goal is, again, just remove the limitations, remove the potential barriers to entry from somebody who's going to do this thing that's going to take care of yourself. Make it as easy as possible. So just have something. And like you said, like it's not that you have to put your phone away, but make your phone work for you instead of like allow you to disconnect from the reality.
Yeah.
Like go and pull up something and then take yourself through it and be like, oh man, I do feel better. I feel more connected to my body. I feel more recovered. Or notice that it improves your quality of sleep, or it improves the quality of your training the next day.
Yeah. I think that's the best part is it's a pain in the butt sometimes when you like still are dedicating things to movement mobility or recovering at night and making sure you sleep. But then the next day when you feel better in your training and you get that extra 5 pounds in your back squat or your snatch, you're like, why do I feel better? It's like you actually slept last night. A couple other things that I think are important for sleep is having a dark room. I think that there's some good research there, and it's just probably worth trying. Like, especially, I get like maybe you don't have blinds up, or there's always a light that's on our street that goes through. So I like set up blackout curtains, right? Like you can't see anything in our room. I think that's really good. And then having it cool enough, and there's some different research there, but I think the high 60s or mid 60s, which seems super, super cold, but that's probably me. It's like, don't ever make it that cold.
Wait, what do you use? No. What temperature? 65.
65.
Okay.
I don't know. She gets she sleeps at 65, but she gets mad when I open the bay door and it's 70 degrees
exactly.
outside.
She's like, it's too cold.
Ugh.
I've heard you complain to Kyle though, because Kyle likes it cold. Yeah, so you have a bunch of blankets on. But having it cool allows you to downregulate a little bit more too and sleep better.
Yeah, just recently. So usually most nights, Caleb makes his way over in our room. He's 7 years old, but he still wants to sleep next to his mom. Up until like 2 weeks ago, he would bring his nightlight with him. Like he would walk into our room, probably still asleep, honestly. Like he's probably not awake, but he has his nightlight with him with the cord trailing behind him. He sets it on the ground and he plugs it in and then he gets into bed. And so like in the middle of the night, if I wake up and the nightlight's there, it's like, all right, I know Caleb's in here now. But 2 weeks ago, he's like, I don't need that anymore. And the quality of my sleep is so much better because the room stays dark, even though he's in there. But like he walks over in the dark and just lays down like, oh man, it's such a difference to not have that nightlight in there. I'm so glad.
It really is. Like when you travel, you're in a hotel and you can't close it all the way and there's this bright light shining. I never can sleep well.
Yeah.
Also in someone like another bed.
Alexis's dad was saying it was like the freaking sun out there. And he had to put like clothes under the door frame.
Yes. Yeah. The doors that are above, like they're a couple inches off the ground, those are the worst because then it's always bright coming through. Yeah. I'll put a towel down for sure.
I think that he shoved like a comforter in there.
Oh my gosh. Next time Jim's in town, that's Alexis's dad. We got to get him on the podcast.
I've heard he's awesome.
He's a
handful. Shout out Jim.
Yep.
Jimmy the Greek.
All right. So we talked about sleep. Let's jump through or skip nutrition because I think that's probably the second most important thing. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but we can kind of finish with that. I think, Becky and Tracy, who are our nutritionists on site, we had a great podcast with them probably a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago. Go and watch that. But we can talk about that last. We talked a little bit about cooling down and breath work and some recovery modalities, but what are the things that you would tell even the class goer, the gym goer that's only the 60-minute class, what are the things that right after training they should think about?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it is probably breath work, which it seems ridiculous to think about, like I'll cool down when I'm driving home or driving to work or anything else. But honestly, like the quicker that you can shift your body into that sort of like rest and digest stage, the better your recovery is going to be, which then improves consistency and it improves quality. So one of the things that I started doing last year for a lot of my individual athletes is, regardless of the session that they did, maybe it was a skill session or maybe it was like a EMOM for time with quality, still at the end of the session, I asked them to go over into a corner, 5 minutes or 30 breaths. You're going to lay on your back. You're going to elevate your feet. You're going to close your eyes, and you're just going to sit there and you're going to breathe. And it's going to be 2-second count on the inhale, 4-second count on the exhale. It takes 5 minutes. And it improves so many things. You shift your body away from that stressful state. You start the recovery process a little bit sooner than when it happened naturally. And then, again, the quality of the day improves, the quality of your mood improves, and the consistency improves over time. It's super easy to do. Super, super easy to do. It's just a lot of people like, it doesn't look like it would be super beneficial, right? It doesn't look like, oh man, like how's this going to help my back squat over time? I'd rather spend that time after the class to go and do a 5x5 squat over.
Right.
But again, we're not chasing intensity for the sake of intensity. We're not chasing volume. We're chasing consistency. And for me to consistently do this routine that allows me to down-regulate, start to decompress, and then improve the quality of that night, that day, and then my training week, that's what I'm going for.
And I would say for those that are working out later in the evening, which 9 to 5 person that's working out at 7 p.m., let's say, they finish at 8 p.m., they still haven't eaten, and they just like rush out and they wonder why they can't fall asleep that night. Yeah. That's a perfect example of add that into your routine. Again, 5 minutes, and you'll notice that you sleep much better. You're able to fall asleep much faster too.
Yeah, there's even guided routines that are free online that you can just follow. You can do mindful meditation where there's like progressive muscle relaxation that goes into it, especially if it's late at night like that, where you can just like sort of allow your mind to just chill out, turn off, listen to a voice, start to relax your body, because then again, improves sleep quality, improves consistency, and then it just, everything else benefits from it.
Yeah. Any other recovery modalities that you would recommend to the everyday athlete?
I know that Kyle Ruth would be a big fan of the contrast therapy. I know that he's got his own setup in his house. I have not been able to play around with it too much, but I do know that there's a lot of good research on cold plunge tubs afterwards. If you're doing an active recovery day to get in the sauna for a couple of bouts, there's really, really good stuff there in terms of that contrast therapy and how it can help improve a lot of the recovery metrics. But other than that, it's really like, what are the sorts of things that are going to help you personally? Like we can look at research, but at the end of the day, it's like, what's helping you feel better? And are you mindful enough to actually be aware of like how things are impacting the trends of your awareness over time?
Yeah. I agree. So let's jump back to nutrition and kind of finish up the conversation there. Most people in the sport now are very thoughtful about what they eat, and probably to a detriment in that they're thinking more about how they look and less about how they perform. Now, there are plenty of people that's what they want to focus on. They go to the CrossFit class because they want to stay fit, and I think that's perfectly fine. But let's talk about the athlete that needs to get a little bit stronger or has more intensity in their training day to day and is trying to perform in the open or quarterfinals, but they're not eating enough.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's most of the people who have probably like leaving something on the table when it comes to nutrition. You're probably not eating enough to be able to fuel your training, to be able to fuel your recovery effectively, which is, again, going to impact consistency over time. So I think a lot of times when we set somebody up with Tracy, when we set somebody up with Becky, one of the first things that they do is they look at their training, they look at what their food is at right now, and then they say, we're going to try and start bumping this up. We're going to increase your carbs over time. We're going to increase your total calories over time. And we're going to keep an eye on your body weight to make sure that things aren't getting out of hand there. But so many times when we put people in touch with Becky and Tracy, they start to up their food. They're just like, oh my gosh, I feel so good. I feel so good right now.
So much stronger, so much more energetic.
I'm eating 500 calories a day more. I'm not putting on weight. I have so much more energy. The quality of my training has improved. The quality of my sleep has improved. I'm not as stressed all the time. It's just such an easy thing, but people get too caught up, I think. And again, it might be what you were saying before. There's this sort of aesthetic thing that goes into CrossFit. Like you feel like you want to look a certain way, or honestly, like you might just not be aware. You might not be aware about what it takes to actually feel like you're fueling your body. Like I feel like a lot of times people fall into this norm of like, I feel pretty good. I feel like I'm probably eating enough, but they don't know what it feels like to
What's
actually
their baseline, right? Their baseline may be bad.
Actually feel like to be eating enough. It's like, I sleep 6 hours a night. I'm fine. I feel rested. Do you know what it feels like to sleep 8 to 9 hours a night? I don't think that you do. So those little changes over time, again, it can be hard to implement on your own. That's why we always say like, hey, go have Becky or Tracy take a look at this. Or if you don't have a coach, just go get a coach. Go see what it feels like to train well with consistency, to eat well and make sure that you're fueled, to sleep well and know that you're ready and rested for the next day. Because like you said, a lot of people's baselines, they're just skewed and they think, I'm good. You know, this feels good. This feels sustainable, but they just don't know what it feels like for it to feel really, really good.
Yeah. It's easy to lie to yourself when that's just your norm, but that norm is not correct, right? Like you're just setting a benchmark that's just like, it's not true. It's not reality or where reality should be.
Yeah.
And the one thing I want to mention too is I've worked with so many athletes now that have worked with either Becky or Tracy or someone else that does a good job and increases calories, and they're always worried about what's going to happen with weight. And then they stay the same and they even get leaner, but they have more energy. So like you get all of those things if you're doing it the right way. And obviously performance goes up when you feel better. You feel more energetic, and then they're PRing all their lifts. They feel better in Metcons. They can push a little bit harder from day to day, which, you know, we're not chasing volume, but as you get close to the open, or, you know, you have to do quarterfinals where there's a couple intense workouts in a row, it really does matter that you're fueled properly so that you can have 100% intensity on the AM session and then the PM session.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, it goes back to like one of the reasons that we're trying to talk about these things now is we don't want people getting to middle of February and saying, oh my gosh, I haven't done anything. What can I do right now? Nutrition, sleep, mindful training. These are all things that you need to be putting into place now so that when the habits are set, they are all paying dividends between now and then. And you don't have to change anything on game day. That's a big thing that we always preach is like when game day rolls around, everybody's like sort of panics and they want to do everything they can to optimize their performance. Hay's in the barn. I mean, we say it all the time. You should have been doing these things months ago, right? Put the things into place now that are going to then pay off over time, and they're just going to increase and accumulate in your favor. And that way, when you get there, you can just look at a workout and know exactly what you're going to do with it and be confident with your ability to go and execute it because you prepared well to get there. Don't get there and then count on like all of that last minute procrastination that's going to get you like, all right, it's the week of the open. I better sleep good. I'm going to try and eat something new today. I'm going to take this new supplement, you know? No, don't. By the time you get to game day, it's too late.
Yeah.
Do the things now that are going to set yourself up for success, which is all those habits that we talked about.
Sure. Yeah. Create habits, have a routine, stay consistent, and then you use those same consistent, that model that you already have in the open, in quarterfinals and beyond. So let's circle all the way back and kind of go through these steps because I think they are important. Write these down if you're an athlete that's trying to figure out how to prep for the open. The first thing is identifying which stage you need to peak for, right? So we talked about this first. If you know that you're going to crush the open, then you're going to focus on the quarterfinals. We don't really know what's going to look like after that. So I think everyone needs to be at their best in quarterfinals unless they're a games athlete, right? So 99.999% of us focus on quarterfinals or maybe the open. If you're not sure about that, then you'd focus on the open, making sure that you're testing and retesting those workouts, that you can identify exactly where you need to be in that. The step number 2 then would be focusing or identifying the movements that may be limiters for you. So you want to touch on that just real quick?
Yeah, I think the really good thing about that is if you are able to run that analysis right now, there's enough time to put training progressions into place. So that's what we talked about before is like if there's something in there that I can pinpoint, I still have enough time to be able to train it. I don't want to get to the open and again just feel like I have no time, right? So say that I pick something out, say it's box jump overs. I have 2 months to be able to isolate, unwind, train it, and then build it back up to a CrossFit setting if I do that right now. But I need to know that was the specific thing that stood out. I can't just look at a 22.1 score and be like, man, I took 5,000 on that one. I don't know what it was. Go back and compare. Look at your video. Look at the video of somebody else doing it. Look at the video of somebody else who did better and / worse than you. Where were you losing time to them? And then try and run that analysis, pinpoint the places that are going to be able to actually like improve upon and then start putting the work in.
Yeah. So then the next step is finding a correct mindset, and you touched on this. I think it really is controlling the controllables, but anchoring to the things that you know that you need to get better at.
Let the comparisons work in your favor, I think is a big thing. It's a very human, primal thing to compare to those around you. Like, I don't think anybody's going to be able to completely avoid that. Like, we always tell people you have to put the blinders on, because if you look at too much, it's going to like inform you in the wrong way. It's like Instagram. You see everybody else's highlight reel, and it's going to make you question your own path. I can't say don't compare yourself to others, but I can say let's at least try and anchor that comparison in a way that's going to work for you. Make sure that when you go and you do a workout, you are trying to think about what is the best possible scenario for you, performance-wise, execution-wise. Run that comparison afterwards. How did your execution actually match up to this? And then run it afterwards objectively to somebody else. Like, all right, they were better than me by 1 round. How? Why? Was it transitions? Was it row speed? Was it wall ball speed? This is where I got to close that gap. So you make this one as objective as possible, and you try and anchor it over here to something that's very personal for you. I think that that's the best way to sort of cover our bases there.
Yeah, I love that. And I do think it is important then to have that objective measurement. So either in something like Compete, where we have a leaderboard, and especially during the open prep where you're doing open style workouts, you have to be okay with maybe getting beat on some things, but then again, anchor it back to the things that you're working on, or with our on-site environment, all all of the athletes. They get so much better. I mean, it's so much fun watching these already really talented athletes come in here and have to compete, because the rising tide raises all ships, right? It's like that's kind of what happens to everyone here.
The other thing that's really interesting about it is you get almost a little bit desensitized to the comparison process, and you don't take it as personally. I remember when the Open was 5 weeks long, and like we always used to joke, like once you get to like week 4 of the Open, like half the field was gone because they got so discouraged from the comparison. They're like, man, I'm really good this year. And oh my gosh, this leaderboard, there's 5,000 people ahead of me. They put too much value into that. Maybe they're a little bit too sensitive to that. Whereas somebody else who really learned how to run this interpersonal comparison as objectively and as much in their favor as possible, they know how to leverage that. They know how to say like, all right, this is just good data for me. I know how to get better now, and I can run the race to its entire length instead of like allowing that to just completely deflate me and cause me to pull out.
Yeah. And then the last thing is focus on your recovery. And we both agree that this is the most important thing, especially for the everyday athlete. Like all the games athletes are focusing on this, but if you want to get better and you're in a 9-to-5 job, you have kids at home, like I both of us empathize with that person, but still stay on top of it and make sure you're doing something for yourself every day.
I know that we talked about it. I think I talked about it with Max one time before, is like even people who have a 9-to-5 job, like they will track their training, right? Like they will take a logbook, maybe it's in the gym software or something else. They intentfully try and track their training so they can see trends over time. All I'm saying is try and track your recovery as well. Find some things that you can measure, that you can actually track and compare the trends to, so that way you know, are you doing the things that are necessary? Or if something's working really well, I want to know what it is, because then I want to double down on that. If I'm tracking my sleep over time, if I'm tracking my caloric intake over time, if I'm tracking my hydration over time, and I'm comparing those trends to my training quality or just like overall mood, then I know like what are the factors that are actually like driving progress, right? If I'm only ever tracking training and the recovery is just like, I'm going to do the best I can, right? I don't know. I can't track the trends, and I'm not as mindful about it. All we're saying is become more mindful about it. Write those numbers down the same way that you would write down what weight you did on the 5x5 back squat. And then you're going to be much more mindful, and it's going to work in your favor over time.
I love that.
So I know our open prep cycle starts
January 2nd.
What are y'all doing in that time between then and February 16th? That's going to be...
Yeah, I think first let me touch on, and we actually, Max and I talked about this in a previous podcast, but I think this is important. Most people are going to hear a podcast like this and they're going to like, okay, let me identify everything and like start crushing it right now, which I think is important, and you want to do that. But also don't get yourself so focused in right now and then fall off the wagon during the next couple of weeks when we go, like most people are traveling for Christmas or New Year's or, celebrating stuff with family. I understand how challenging that's going to be, but having some kind of base now matters. And so in our online programs or with all of our individual coaches, we are trying to help our athletes navigate the holiday season first. Like that's the most important thing. Let's get you healthy. Let's make sure that we're still focusing on the skills that you need to get better at. Most people probably take a little bit of a deload. And then when we start on January 2nd, everyone's ready to go. So that's kind of like step number one. As far as our open cycle, the way that we look at this is we have kind of two sets of athletes, and we already talked about this. The first one are those athletes that aren't sure if they can get through the top 10%. Those are the athletes that we tell that they need to be in the intermediate path. And what Mia does there that I think is really cool is she sets up the entire cycle to help them prepare for tests and retests of the open workouts, and then also all the skills that we know for sure will come out in the open. As Adam talked about earlier, the tests in the open have been much different than the tests in quarterfinals. You haven't seen things like rope climbs or, maybe some of the heavier, the 185-pound power snatches, or at least not only 185-pound power snatch in the open. Whereas the open usually less bottlenecks, a little bit faster. The time domains are kind of the same throughout all three tests. And so that's the focus of the intermediate path, to prep those people for the open. The rest of the athletes that we say to them at the beginning of the cycle, and we'll have some videos on this to educate the people when they come in. If you know you're a top 10% athlete, then you're going to focus and peak for quarterfinals. So we will only do the workouts once during the open. Again, this is assuming you're going to crush it. You're going to be in the top 10%. You're going to go on into quarterfinals. And then our strength program in intermediate is peaking for open. Our strength program for RX, Elite, Masters is peaking for quarterfinals, and then the CrossFit is also peaking then for quarterfinals. So essentially what it looks like is we'll train all the way through the open with quarterfinal style test as opposed to it just being open style test. So the training looks different in that instead of it only being, a 10-minute AMRAP of light power snatches and burpees, you'll see some of that because you need to be good at it. Yeah. It may be heavier power snatches and burpee box jump overs because that's what we've seen in quarterfinals. So all of that to say, the focus of the training changes from path to path, but I think the cool thing about that is it allows the athletes the different styles of athletes to pick and fit into the mold that they need to train for.
Yeah. Yeah, the needs are just different. And they might not seem like much because it's like one level or one tier up. But the difference between the needs analysis between the open and the quarterfinals is so dramatic that's why we preach, like, have the self-awareness to know what is it that you're training for and be really objective about it. Because if you undersell yourself or if you have too much ego, you're probably going to train ineffectively and you're probably going to be setting yourself up to be a little bit disappointed at the end of the day. So having the self-awareness to know where is your season going to actually come to a peak and what is it that you need to be prepared for is probably the most important thing. And then working backwards from there, which is what you guys have done in the compete path.
For sure.
You've already reverse engineered it.
Yeah. And the last thing I think as far as movement selection goes is we're thinking about, okay, what are the most common combos, time domains, and movements that have been tested in the open? And then we don't have as much data with quarterfinals, but we also can kind of pull back on old regional, sectional, sanctional style workouts. And then we've pulled on the master side because they have been doing a, quote unquote, age group qualifier quarterfinal for several years. We take those movements and then what are the most, again, common time domains, combos, and movements, and then we pull those as well. And then the last thing that we've done this year, we did this last year prepping for the games too, because we had quite a few athletes that went to the games or semifinals. When we knew that Bosman was programming, I went through and pulled as many workouts that I could from San Francisco CrossFit, anything that I could find online, on Instagram, on CrossFit that he was attached to, and we try to find those biases. And as random as the sport can be, there's still, to Adam's point earlier, trends that you can find, and we found some of those trends. We found parallel bars as something that he liked to use, or kettlebells in odd movements, and we didn't see as much of that in the games, but I assume we may see something like that this year. So those are the things that we're thinking about as coaches. We're trying to pull as much data as we can.
Kettlebells really fell out of CrossFit.
They did. Well, I think it was so hard to judge.
Most CrossFit logos have a kettlebell built in them, at least.
That is true.
And you don't even use those jokers anymore.
They did a kettlebell swing back in 2011, and there was just like an uproar for the standard because they were no repping some people.
What's the top of the rep?
Yeah, correct. And it is hard. If
well,
you
good thing we don't have any uproars about standards anymore.
We're past that. We're past that.
Oh man, no matter what, even if it was perfect, everyone's going to complain.
But yeah, that standard sucked.
Yeah. Well, think about it. I was just doing kettlebell swings the other day, and I was like, can I even get this pointed? The bottom of it still kind of tilts a little bit. Yeah. Not every rep is perfectly straight up, and if it is, you have to pause and hold it, and then you kind of lose your momentum of
what was
the
that
swing.
thing? I think it was called taters or potatoes or something. Kettlebell taters.
Where you flipped it?
Yeah, where you flip it. Yeah. Come on, dude. Let's see some taters at the game.
Well, I mean, one of the things that, and I don't know, maybe it wasn't Bosman that programmed this as much, but in San Francisco CrossFit did a ton of Turkish get-ups and other single-arm kettlebell movements. So not that you'll see a Turkish get-up, but those kind of things I think is just worth adding into athletes. And the other thing, by the way, is you saw pistols on one leg and then pistols on another leg.
Have you ever done Turkish get-ups on a Metcon?
I have, but it's been years.
CrossFit Memphis, back when I first started, we used to do those Metcons all the time, and you just get really good at just crashing down like an asshole. Just instead of coming down slow, you just fall to the ground.
Rogue had a challenge for 1RM Turkish get up. Did you see that?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man, I'd be so
bad.
Most was? It had to be some crazy amount.
I want to say it was like 185 pounds on a barbell.
That's so impressive.
Oh my gosh.
I
wonder what the standards were on coming back down though, because that's what I would ghost it.
Well, I think that's the hardest part.
135.
Yeah.
On a one-hand barbell?
You did 135?
115 or 135. I can't remember which one it was.
Both hands? Just right hand?
Probably just one side.
So I've told this story to you too, but I'll tell this to the audience. The most impressive one-handed barbell movement that I've seen is we had a coach. He played football at Marshall. He came down. He's like a guest coach in high school for a couple weeks. I don't know what he ended up doing, but he was so strong. And somebody power snatched 225. And they just got in this they're just chirping back and forth. He's like, I bet you I can snatch that with one arm. And he goes over to the bar, grabs it with one arm, and power snatches 225. This is a true God's honest story.
I have not heard that story.
I know. I could have sworn I told this to you.
Oh my gosh.
It wasn't
Was it clean though? Did he have clips on? Did he catch it clean? Because the other day I went, what was it? Were you in there, Mia? I just walked up to a bar with 100 on it and did it clean where it was balanced perfect. But then these other guys that turned into a dick measuring contest, they did it and their shit was only saved because of the clips. So meaning it was leaning off to the side. So it would have been, if you didn't have the clips on, it would have been a no rep. So that doesn't count.
He picked it up all the way over his head. He stood up real quick and just threw it forward. It wasn't like he's holding it there for 10 seconds. But the fact that he took a 225-pound barbell and got it all the way over his head.
That's fine. But there's bats in the comment section of that one. Yeah, he did stand up and show control.
It was
all right.
So
fine.
impressive.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
Golly.
Some people, like, we think that there are some strong CrossFitters, but if you see other, I mean, there's a guy from Iowa last year that was in the combine, offensive tackle, that did 455 for 5 hang clean.
Oh my gosh.
He did what now?
455 pounds, 5 reps, touch and go hang clean.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Look that video up. It's incredible.
What's he doing now?
I'm assuming he plays in the NFL. Could you imagine?
He's doing that to the linemen.
Yeah. Could you imagine that guy grabbing you, just throwing you?
If he didn't make a team, I sounds like Florida's still trying to hang on to the grid league down there. Maybe we can y'all ever see that? There's
it's still going on.
Shout out to we need to get those guys on a podcast.
I have an athlete that does
you have a dead sport that never really went anywhere, but y'all are hanging on. I love it.
No, they're still impressive with the things that they do.
Yeah, it's super impressive. I think it's hard to get an audience outside of the fitness world.
Yeah. Every time I see the butterfly muscle ups, part of my pec tears just watching.
I love that they can do all of those things. Or the Chris's point, the strong guys that go out there and it's like 225 touch and go snatch for 5, and then they do like 10 deadlifts at something super heavy, and then go back to it. Just like
take a nap.
Sheer power. Yeah, exactly. It's insane.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
See y'all next time.
All right. We'll see you next time.